Tolu's life had always been a mix of triumphs and struggles. Growing up as the eldest of 3 sisters, she was the pride of her family. Her father often reminded her, "Tolu, you're destined for greatness, but greatness comes with responsibility." She took his words to heart and worked tirelessly to make a name for herself. By the time she was 25, she had built a thriving fashion business that catered to the wealthy elite. Her ambition and drive were unmatched, but they came at a cost. Tolu's sharp tongue and domineering personality earned her both admiration and resentment. Men were often intimidated by her confidence, and over time, whispers began to circulate, "She'll never find a husband." At 38, Tolu finally married Abiola, and her joy knew no bounds. For years, she had endured judgments from friends and family who believed she was destined to remain single. Many had mocked her, calling her arrogant and unlovable. But Tolu had proven them wrong. Abiola was her miracle, the man who had seen beyond her tough exterior to the vulnerable woman within. Abiola was everything Tolu wasn't: gentle, patient, and kind. A banker in his early 40s, he was a single father to a 22-year-old son named Michael. Their first meeting was anything but pleasant. They had bumped into each other at a supermarket, and Tolu, already in a foul mood, lashed out at him. Abiola, to her surprise, didn't retaliate. Instead, he looked at her calmly and asked, "Are you okay?" Those 3 simple words disarmed her completely. For the first time in years, someone had seen through her anger to the pain underneath. From that moment, their journey began. Despite her wealth and status, Tolu found herself drawn to Abiola's quiet strength. He didn't try to compete with her, instead, he supported her dreams and aspirations. Even though he wasn't as wealthy as she was, he insisted on contributing equally to their household. "I want to provide for you with my own money," he told her. Tolu respected him for this and, for the first time, allowed herself to let her guard down. After their wedding, Tolu convinced Abiola to move into her luxurious home. She took charge of managing the household, giving their domestic staff strict instructions to cater to her husband's every need. "My husband is a quiet man," she told them. "He won't complain, but I don't want to hear any excuses. His clothes must always be ironed, his shoes polished, and his meals ready when he gets home." The staff nodded, knowing better than to cross her. Michael, Abiola's son, soon moved in with them. Tolu had been nervous about how he would perceive her, but to her relief, he adored her. Michael was polite, intelligent, and full of life. He brought a youthful energy to the household, and Tolu quickly grew fond of him. They spent hours talking, watching movies, and cooking together while Abiola was at work. It felt like the perfect family. But as time went on, whispers from friends began to sow seeds of doubt. "Tolu, be careful," one friend warned. "You're spending too much time with Michael. He's a grown man, after all." Tolu dismissed their concerns, laughing it off. "Michael is like a son to me," she said. "There's nothing to worry about." One evening, everything changed. Tolu accidentally walked in on Michael as he stepped out of the shower. She froze, her eyes widening in shock. Michael quickly wrapped a towel around himself, but the image lingered in her mind. From that moment, Tolu found herself struggling with emotions she didn't understand. She tried to suppress them, but they grew stronger with each passing day. One day, unable to resist, Tolu called Michael into her room. She locked the door and confessed her feelings, leaning in to kiss him. Michael recoiled, horrified. "What are you doing?" he demanded. Tolu begged him to understand, but Michael refused. "You're my stepmother," he said. "This is wrong." He stormed out, and from that moment, their relationship changed. The once warm and easy bond they shared turned cold and distant. Michael avoided her as much as possible, and Tolu felt the weight of her actions pressing down on her. Abiola began to notice the tension between them. "Is everything okay?" he asked one evening at dinner. Both Tolu and Michael shook their heads, insisting that nothing was wrong. But the truth was far from it. Tolu's obsession with Michael grew, and she began to use manipulation to get what she wanted. She offered him money, gifts, and anything else she thought might persuade him. Reluctantly, Michael gave in, and what began as a one-time mistake spiraled into something far darker. Months later, Tolu discovered she was pregnant. Panic set in as she realized she couldn't be sure if the baby belonged to Abiola or Michael. She kept the secret to herself, terrified of the consequences. When the baby was born, Tolu secretly conducted a DNA test and was relieved to learn that Abiola was the father. She threw herself into motherhood, determined to give her child the best life possible. She transferred all her assets into his name and made plans to secure his future. But Abiola wasn't as oblivious as Tolu believed. He had suspected something was wrong for months and had installed a hidden camera in their home. When he reviewed the footage, he was devastated by what he saw. Confronting Michael, he demanded the truth. Michael, unable to lie, confessed everything. Abiola was shattered. The woman he loved and the son he had raised had betrayed him in the worst possible way. Abiola didn't confront Tolu immediately. Instead, he began planning his revenge. One day, while Tolu was out of the house, Abiola and Michael packed up their belongings, took the baby, and disappeared without a trace. When Tolu returned home to find the house empty, panic set in. She searched every room, calling out their names, but there was no response. On the bed, she found a note, "The joke's on you. How dare you betray me with my own son?" Devastated, Tolu fell to her knees, clutching the note as tears streamed down her face. She hired private investigators, scoured the city, and even went public with her story, begging for forgiveness and pleading for Abiola to return her child. But the backlash was brutal. People ridiculed her, calling her a disgrace and a monster. Her once flawless reputation was destroyed, and she became the subject of public scorn. Overwhelmed by shame and grief, Tolu was eventually admitted to a psychiatric hospital. For years, she lived in torment, calling out for her son every day. Her health deteriorated, and she became a shadow of the vibrant woman she once was. 12 years later, Abiola finally returned, bringing their son with him. But it was too late. Tolu had taken her own life, leaving behind a note filled with regret and forgiveness. As Abiola read her final words, he wept, realizing the depth of her pain. Their son, now grown, gently held her hand and whispered, "Mommy." For the first time in years, a peaceful smile seemed to grace Tolu's face as she was finally laid to rest. This story serves as a haunting reminder of the consequences of betrayal and the fragile nature of trust. It is a tale of love, loss, and the irreversible choices that shape our lives.